ESPN recently released a list of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, which was created using rankings from team executives and scouts. This list was guaranteed to upset people, but one thing specifically caused an uproar, and that was the exclusion of Lamar Jackson. I think it's safe to say that Lamar Jackson is probably the most polarizing player in the NFL right now. NFL fans either love him and think he's a superstar, or hate him and think he's massively overrated. There's no in between. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, it is impossible for people to have a nuanced conversation about how good Lamar Jackson is. I want to change that though, so let's go through the numbers and see just how good Lamar Jackson is, and whether or not he is truly a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think a big reason why a lot of NFL fans hold Lamar Jackson in such high regard is because of his MVP season. In 2019, Lamar Jackson took over the NFL, throwing for 3,127 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He also terrorized teams as a runner, averaging 80.4 rushing yards per game and 6.90 yards per carry. The Ravens were a run-heavy offense this year, so Lamar didn't attempt a high volume of passes per game, but his passing efficiency was off the charts. He ranked 4th in the league in adjusted net yards per attempt, which is a metric that uses passing yards, passing touchdowns, interceptions, and sacks to measure efficiency. In 2019, Lamar Jackson was a dominant dual-threat quarterback whose prowess as a passer and rusher allowed him to put up a league-leading QBR of 83. QBR is a metric that uses EPA, or expected points added, to measure efficiency. It is a very good measure of quarterback play because it includes rushing production, which is something that a stat like adjusted net yards per attempt does not. Lamar's QBR in 2019 was incredible, and ranks 4th since the stat started being tracked in 2006. Lamar's success was reflected in the Ravens' offensive efficiency, as they ranked 1st in EPA per dropback and 6th in dropback success rate. The Ravens weren't just great on paper, they were good on the field, sporting a 14-2 record, which was the best in the NFL. As someone who tends to defend Lamar Jackson, I think it is clear and obvious that he was an elite player and the best performing quarterback in 2019. I also think there is great evidence that he was an elite passer this year, as his passing efficiency was unreal. Unfortunately, things went downhill from here. Let's talk about Lamar's performance over the last 2 seasons. After his historic 2019 season, Lamar saw a steady decline in his production in 2020 and 2021. In 2020, Lamar ranked 17th in adjusted net yards per attempt and 7th in QBR. He got worse in every area as a passer, as his completion percentage and touchdown rate decreased, while his interception rate and sack rate increased. His passing efficiency saw a big dip, but his excellence as a runner allowed him to be a top 10 quarterback according to QBR. The next season in 2021, his production fell even further, as he ranked 20th in adjusted net yards per attempt and 17th in QBR. He was still a very productive runner this season, but he didn't score as many rushing touchdowns, so his QBR took a bit of a nosedive. As you can see, his production as a passer and rusher has gotten a lot worse over the last 2 seasons. Lamar's 2021 statistical profile is excusable in my opinion because the Ravens had a ton of injuries and he had a ridiculous offensive load. However, his performance in 2020 is less excusable. Some people like to point out the fact that Lamar Jackson hasn't played with many great receivers, but I don't think that's a legitimate excuse. The Ravens chose to build their offense around Lamar's biggest strength, his rushing ability. They put a ton of capital into their offensive line, tight ends, and running backs, which made them the most dangerous rushing attack in the NFL. They had to sacrifice their receiving core to do this, but we've seen Lamar Jackson be an elite passer without star-level receivers around him. Now, I wish I didn't have to discuss what I'm about to talk about, but I cannot make a Lamar Jackson video without talking about the playoffs. Lamar Jackson stands, you might want to look away because this is about to get ugly. Lamar has played 4 career playoff games since 2018, and he has a career adjusted net yards per attempt of 4.01 in the postseason. That number is unbelievably low. For his playoff career, his interception rate is higher than his touchdown rate, and he has a ridiculous sack rate of 12.3%. He has been phenomenal as a runner in the playoffs, as he's averaged 91.8 rushing yards per game in his playoff career. Unfortunately, that hasn't made up for his poor passing productivity, as he sports a 1-3 record in the postseason. I will say, the NFL playoffs are a small sample size, and I don't like to grill players for struggling in a small sample of games. However, the best quarterbacks in the NFL are really good playoff performers, and Lamar Jackson has just been brutally bad in the postseason. At his best, Lamar Jackson is a dominant force who is very difficult to stop. Unfortunately, that version of him has been absent since his MVP season in 2019. I have no issue defending his talent because it is obvious that he is one of the most gifted quarterbacks in the NFL. However, I absolutely cannot overlook his worsening production, and I will not pretend like he hasn't been absolutely terrible in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson is a unique player who has the potential to be a top 5 quarterback for years to come, but I don't think there's any way you can be confident saying that he is a top 10 quarterback after the way he's played the last 2 seasons and after the way he struggled in the playoffs throughout his career so far. Thanks for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing.